Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dylan Ryder from the Johnson County Library's Career and Finance Committee. We have the privilege to be joined by college and career planner Jason Anderson, who will be offering tips to help you manage your student debt. Now, some quick background about our presenter. Jason Anderson is a seasoned college consultant focused on affordability, student success, and financial common sense. Jason holds an extensive professional background, including roles as a higher ed instructor, entrepreneur, and professional college and career planning consultant. He's a certified public accountant in the state of Kansas and holds not one, but two master's degrees in business and education. Feel free to participate in this discussion by using the chat to add your comments and questions. While the contents of this program will be recorded for future viewing, Jason will attempt to address your questions following the recorded portion of this presentation. And thank you all again. And here's Jason.
Hey, everybody. Good to be here. You know, these presentations with Johnson County Public Library are really my favorite venues to do workshops. So maybe some of you all have joined me for other workshops that I do. I've regularly conducted workshops on FAFSA. I've talked about financial aid, how to build a dream career, all sorts of different presentations that I do for this library, and they're always fun. A couple things I need to talk about before we get started here. One is a disclaimer. So you probably saw in my, or heard, I guess, in my introduction that I'm a full-time professor. So I do teach for the University of Kansas. And I like just at the beginning of these presentations to say this is when I'm wearing my grad metrics hat, not my KU hat. Essentially, I run grad metrics on the side as a part-time side gig, I guess you could call it, doing college and student loan planning. And so keep that in your mind. The second disclaimer is that I am dressed casual today. So I'm on vacation and I forgot to pack my button up. So I apologize for that. I'm not always this casual, but packing for myself and a significant other and kids, you all know how it goes. Sometimes you just forget a few things. And for me, it was my button-up shirt. All right, so what are we going to do today? We're going to look at the agenda for this presentation. And I do kind of diversify this presentation simply because I know some of you all are coming to this because maybe you have a kid that's going to go off to college. And so when it comes to managing student loan debt, your thought is, how do I make it where my student takes out as little as possible? Or what should I do when I go off to college or my kid goes off to college? So we're going to answer those questions. Then we're going to talk about student loans in general, because we need to have some background knowledge in federal student loans in particular. And then we'll move on to strategies. So if you're in this presentation and you're currently saddled with a lot of student loan debt, and you're wondering, how do I manage that? That's what the last portion of this presentation is for, to tell you all those tips and tricks to manage your student debt. Okay, so let's start out with financial aid. This is a general overview of financial aid, what I would call financial aid 101. So what's offered through the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid? Well, there are several types of aid that are given out by the government. The first is grants. So you might get a Pell Grant or Teach Grant. You might get scholarships from the school itself. And you may say, hey, well, that's coming from the school, not the government. Well, you're correct. But when you fill out the FAFSA, all your information is sent to these different schools. They use your financial information to allocate scholarships. And so it is based on the FAFSA in many cases. Then work study, this is where you get a job on campus and the government pays for that job while you're in school. And then we have federal student loans, which is really what we're going to focus on in this presentation. So we have direct subsidized, direct unsubsidized, and then direct plus loans for graduate students and their parents. Then we have private student loans. So if you went out to a bank or to a large provider, many are out there. I'm not necessarily going to recommend or even mention many of those, but a credit union, what have you, you can get student loans out there in the private space that don't originate from the government. And then you can get private scholarships. So if you're part of the Rotary Club, for instance, they would offer scholarships, or maybe you won one from Coca-Cola, what have you. So this is really a general overview of the types of aid opportunities that we see to go off to college. Now, some of these are based on need, okay? So financial need, and that's really what the FAFSA is set up to do. Or if you filled out an application called the CSS profile, same thing. These applications are really meant to vet your finances, your income, and the assets that you have in order to figure out, do you have financial need? Do you need money to go to college? And so some aid that's given out are for families that demonstrate financial needs. So this might be the Pell Grant, the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. And then one thing that's important for this workshop's presentation is a direct subsidized loan. So you might fill out the FAFSA, get a direct subsidized loan. What does that mean? It means that the government's paying for interest while you're in school. Now you're going to eventually have to pay interest on this loan, okay? But it's delayed. And that's a way that the government is essentially making it where it doesn't cost as much to take out this loan. So that's subsidized when the government pays for your loan while you're in school. Then we have work study. Again, that's based on federal, or that's based on need and not just given out to anybody. And really, when we look at the calculation here, it's the cost of attendance to the school, and this is everything like tuition, books, fees, transportation expenses, personal expenses, everything that you saw in your financial aid letter. Then it's less what the government would expect you to be able to pay towards college every year, and that demonstrates what your financial need is, whether you'll get those different programmatic opportunities there. Then some aid is given that's not based on financial need. And this is one of the main misconceptions that I run into when it comes to the FAFSA, is to say, Jason, we're not going to fill this out. We're not going to get anything. We make too much money. And I say, you could make $1 trillion a year. You would still get something. That something is called a direct unsubsidized loan. So it's the same as the loan that we just talked about. By the way, both of these loans go in the name of the student as well, which is kind of another subsidy, because if you think about it, a lot of students don't have an income, they don't have a credit score, and so the government's giving them a loan without a cosigner. That would never happen in the private space, right? So in a sense, these are already privileged loans. We're going to talk about more ways that they're privileged in terms of repayment plans, loan forgiveness. That's coming down the pike as we continue to talk about these topics. But direct unsubsidized loan is probably what you think. So it's not subsidized. The government's not paying for your interest while you're in school. It is unsubsidized. That interest starts to accrue immediately when you take it out. But one thing that we're going to talk about is interest rates are historically low on these student loans right now. And so it's still a pretty good deal for many families to take out loans from the government, even if they are unsubsidized. Now, there's another thing, though, called a federal plus loan. And this is based on a different type of calculation, okay? This is based on the full cost of attendance and then all the financial aid that you're offered. And then basically, do you have any need that we might be able to fill in? And where the federal plus loans are given out is a lot of times, again, to graduate students, but also to parents. So a lot of times parents still show a gap in the funding between the full cost of attendance and what they can actually contribute in the financial aid that they've been given. And so if you have that gap, sometimes the government will give you a plus loan to fill that need. And so when we hear these horror stories of families going out and taking out hundreds of thousands in debt, a lot of times those horror stories are coming from this plus loan program, because really you can start to borrow up to the full cost of attendance, which the full cost of attendance is a lot. We're going to talk about that here in a second. And then the TEACH grant, Teacher Access for College Higher Education grant, that is it is not based on need as well. So if you're going to teach, it's a great opportunity to get some free money. So how much can we get in each of these different categories? Well, a Pell Grant, right now, that free money you don't have to pay back if you demonstrate financial need, that's $6,495 for the 21-22 school year. Then we have the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, that's up to $4,000. Teach Grant, up to $4,000. Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant, same as the Pell Grants, up to that $6,495. Then those direct subsidized and unsubsidized student loans that we've been talking about that go to a student, how much can they take out? Well, for undergraduates that are dependent, and that tends to be the general case that we look at. This is like a high school senior going off to college. They're still dependent on their family, and the FAFSA has kind of their own categories that they distinguish this. But let's just go with that it's a dependent student. Then they're capped at $31,000. And actually, we'll look at the actual allocation freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, and I'll show you what you get. It actually increases over time. You start at $5,500 and you go up from there. But over 4 years, you would get $27,000. But if you go longer than 4 years, it's capped at $31,000. And then that direct plus loan to graduate and parents, again, this is where we see larger amounts of debt being taken out, because it's essentially looking at kind of that full cost of attendance, and you can borrow up to that. Student loans. So let's talk just general student loans before we get into the strategies right now. What do you think is the average student loan payment today? Just think about that. You can put it in the chat box if you'd like. You don't have to. Per month, what do you think the average student pays? Well, that number is $393 a month. And for some of you, this may seem like a really small amount. For some of you, this may seem like a lot. This is the average. But when we start talking about graduate students, people who have gone to dental, law, medical school, this can be substantially more, in the thousands, that they're paying each month on their debt. So if you're in one of those categories, or you've taken out a lot of debt getting an undergraduate and a graduate degree, what have you, this presentation is a good place to be. But this is generally what we see across the average. Let's look at some other statistics. So right now, total student loan debt, federal and private, 1.67 trillion. When I started doing college planning, it was, I think, about 1.2, 1.3. And so it's going up pretty significantly. By the way, all credit card debt in the United States, only about only about 1 trillion. So we have a significantly larger pot of money when it comes to debt outstanding for people to go to college. Then 1.56 trillion is in federal loans, those loans that come from the government, versus 138 billion in private student loans. And that's why in this presentation, I'm focusing on federal student loans. And hopefully many of you all are in that case. I'll talk about private student loans and some strategies there, but generally the perks that we look at and the lion's share of the debt is going to be on the federal side. Delinquency rate, 6.5%, and I've seen it even higher than this in certain cases. And what that means is that a lot of times interest rates are higher because there's higher delinquencies. It's a riskier debt class. And so keep that in mind when you go out and try to get a private student loan. You may have good credit. You still may get a higher interest rate than you would expect. Part of that is because the bank is trying to essentially make sure that they get paid back. Then we have federal student loan borrowers, 42 million. Average student loan debt about 36,000. And that makes sense because remember when I told you that students were capped at about 31,000 for dependent students? Well, this is, again, we probably have it skewed up a little bit because of graduate students and things like that. So it makes sense that it's around 30 to 35,000 because that's what the government is capping students at. So for those students that are saying, or their parents are saying, we're not going to take out any debt, do what you can, they're going to be capped at 31,000. Now, if we look at this across states, it's interesting because the darker colors are the colors that we don't want to see. So we're in Kansas, Johnson County Public Library. I live in Kansas. You can see that we're a lighter color, but our darker color states that we don't want to see, well, Missouri is one of them. So our next door neighbors and even Illinois, but you can see, especially on the coast and up in New England, which isn't surprising for me. We've got a lot of universities up here in the New England area that are private and very expensive. And so we can see some of the southern New England coasts are not doing as well. They've got a higher average student loan debt. So we want to stay on the lower end. All right, so just philosophically, kind of go along with me here. Now, I do work for KU, but full disclosure as well, I'm actually starting a doctoral program at K-State, but I can pick on them, right? I think I'm contractually obligated. And so if we look at K-State and we think about 4 years, which remember, we're in Kansas, this is an in-state school, which kind of the general philosophy behind the in-state schools is they're supposed to be affordable, right? And by the way, KU is not too much different here. Many state schools across the United States are not much different than these numbers that I'm gonna show you here for K-State. But if we think about the full cost of attendance at K-State, this would include living on campus, books, fees, personal expenses, transportation expenses. What do you think it costs per year to go to K-State right now? What do you think that number is? Well, that number is $27,185. And so this is before financial aid. Maybe you got a scholarship or what have you, some of those loans from the FAFSA, but this is what it's going to cost you every year. Now, if we look at a 5% increase over 4 years, that total is shockingly going to be $117,170. This is astounding. And by the way, many schools don't even keep a 4-year timeline anymore for graduation because most people are graduating more towards 5 years. And so if we go 5 years, it's gonna cost even more. And so if we look at the massive amounts of student loan debt that are out there, well, why? Because cost has gone through the roof, and that's unfortunate. So if you're on this call, you have lots of student loan debt. It is what it is. The system is broken. Right now, it's just not a great time. Well, I'm not going to say it's not a good time to go to college because in many ways, the return is still there. But in some ways it's not. And why is the return not there sometimes? Well, because of the massive amounts of student loan debt. Okay, so there are two main categories when we start talking about student loans. Again, we have federal student loans. These are funded by the government. We have private student loans that are from a bank, credit union, or another financial institution. Then we have these different types that we've been talking about. Again, I'm reviewing here because we need to know all this stuff as we go into more technical details. We have those subsidized loans. These are given to individuals with financial need, and it's where the government pays for the interest while we're in school. Then we have direct unsubsidized loans, which is where these are for undergraduate and graduate students, and these aren't subsidized and that the government isn't paying for the interest while you're going through school, and you don't need to have financial need to get these. By the way, I'm going to take questions at the end of this. We will likely cut off the recording at the end of this presentation and then take questions, because a lot of times when individuals are asking questions about student loans, they tend to be something that we don't want to broadcast on YouTube, right? And so we'll be taking those as we get to the end. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. We'll get to them at the end. All right, so I told you when it comes to those loans that are given out to dependent students, remember it was capped at 31,000, you get 27,000 over 4 years. Well, here's the breakdown. And so if you're looking at a financial aid letter right now, you have a dependent student that's going to go off to school, whatever, you will see that over their first year, they're going to get 5,500 in unsubsidized loans or subsidized loans or some type of mix of both. So they're going to get 5,500 their first year. Second year, they're going to get 6,500, so it goes up a little bit. Third year and beyond, so third and fourth year, and hopefully not a fifth, but maybe a fifth, you're going to get 7,500. So again, over 4 years, 27,000, and capped at 31 for dependent students. Now, if you look at independent students, like let's say you're older, or you're a veteran, or you're married, you may be an independent student, and then those caps get significantly higher. But if you're kind of your traditional high school senior going off to college, a lot of times you're going to be capped on what you can actually take out in federal loans. Now, again, these are in the student's name. We're not talking about Parent Plus loans or Graduate Plus loans. We're just talking about those that go in the student's name. But as we look at these orange boxes, what's the problem? Well, the problem is if we think back to what I just told you about K-State, 117,000 over 4 years, 31,000 is not going to cut it, right? We're going to have a massive gap. This is not even going to get close to what we need to go to college. And so that's why you see a lot of families get more creative nowadays in how they attack education, maybe go to 2 years to community college, maybe go to another institution that's a cheaper state school, not live on campus, cut out a lot of that cost, because this is not a lot of money to play with when we're talking about 117,000. Now, again, we're not talking about plus loans. Sometimes the other option for many families is they say, okay, we'll take out that debt. We'll pay the 117,000. We're going to do it in plus loans. And so we see parents come out with massive amounts of debt to send their kids off to school. And we're only talking about one student, by the way. I have 2 kids. And so many of you all probably have many more. And that can be a real issue when it comes to college cost. So let's talk direct plus loans. These are for graduate and professional students and parents. They require a credit check. So it's different in that respect. And they are higher interest rates. So the government is very interested in getting an undergraduate through school, not so interested in helping their parents pay for these expenses. And so it's a higher interest rate, higher fees. And we'll look at those here in a second. And this is based on, again, a different formula. So let's look at those interest rates. If we look at those undergraduate borrowers, historically low interest rates, 2.75%. Graduate and professional borrowers for direct unsubsidized loans, 4.3. But look at this, as we get up to parents and graduate students, we're looking at 5.3% for direct plus loans. So that's a pretty significant increase. Not only that, we have a difference in fees that are involved. So if we look at like an undergraduate borrower taking out a subsidized and unsubsidized direct loan, that origination fee is 1%. When we get up here to direct plus loans, it's over 4%. And so not only is this interest rate higher, your kind of actual interest rate is going to be higher because of the larger fee that's attached to this debt class. So keep that in mind. The government will allow many families to take out a Parent Plus loan, but you're going to pay a higher price, significantly higher price than the students that are going to be able to take out that 27 or 31,000. Okay, so now hopefully that's given some of you folks that have joined because your kid's going off to school or you're still thinking about taking out student loans for graduate school or undergraduate. You've gotten a good overview of student loans. Now we're going to talk about strategies. So for those of you that have joined this call because you have debt, this is what you need to know. So again, we're going to focus on federal student loans because that's the lion's share of the debt that's out there. The first thing that we need to talk about in terms of strategies for paying your loans back is different repayment plans. So the majority of people slot into the standard repayment plan. So when you take out a federal student loan and you start repaying on it after your grace period, you're going to probably, well, you will be slotted into the standard plan. So the standard plan is the default plan, and it's a 10-year even repayment. So you'll have even payments over 10 years. When you get done with 10 years, you paid off the loan. So pretty simple. And a lot of people are there because they don't know there are any other options, and there are other options. And so you should be aware that there might be another plan that would fit your situation better or alleviate some of the stress or even open you up to additional perks like loan forgiveness. So what are those other repayment plans? Well, the first is a graduated repayment plan. So this is the same 10-year repayment, but now the payments change. So you pay less at the beginning and you pay more as the loan ages. Well, why does the government have a plan like this? Well, it's because the idea that you'll go off and work your first job, you may not make that much money, but hopefully with a college degree, as you continue to get jobs and promotions and move around, you'll make more money and you'll be able to afford higher payments. And so your payments increase over time. And due to the growth of interest, you're going to pay more on this plan than you would the standard repayment plan. But again, it may be a better fit for your situation. But crucially, we're going to talk about public service loan forgiveness here in a bit. But public service loan forgiveness, this is not a qualifying plan. So if you've thought about public service loan forgiveness or you're working towards that and you're in a graduated repayment plan, you're going to become part of that statistic where you're going to get rejected. And part of that is because you're not in a qualifying plan. So you have to make sure if you're going for public service loan forgiveness that you're in a qualifying plan. Extended plan is what you might think by the name. So that means that we're extending the term of the loan. So instead of 10 years, we're going beyond that. And in this case, you're going to pay off your loan by 25 years. And you're going to have lower payments because we're extending the term. So extending the term, lower payments. And this also is not a qualifying plan for public service loan forgiveness. You will again pay more than the standard repayment plan because of that growth of interest. So those are our first three repayment plans. Now, these next ones get kind of cool because they're a little more complicated, but they can have real benefits for a family that slots into them. So the first is the payee and repayee programs. And these are where we start to pay based on a percentage of our discretionary income. So your discretionary income is assessed and you pay based on that assessment. And so these are recalculated payments when you report income and family information on an annual basis. So maybe you're starting to make more money, your payments are going to go up because you have more discretionary income. And these are qualifying plans for public service loan forgiveness. So if you're here, you're going towards public service loan forgiveness, you're in a good place. And these are the next one that we're going to talk about, IBR, ICR plans, income sensitive plans, and the pay repay programs are really great from, again, people that feel a huge burden from their student loans, looking at discretionary income as kind of a litmus test. By the way, we are going through just kind of general how to do this, but there's a lot of nuance here. So I'm going to give you one or two things. One, you can go to the actual website, which I'll give that to you at the end of this presentation, where you can do research on each of these plans, figure out which one's best for you. And there are even some strategies as we talk about 10% for discretionary income. So there are some strategies as to how you can lower your discretionary income by giving maybe to an account like an HSA or doing married filing separately on your taxes versus married filing joint. So lots of strategies here, but this is a general presentation, so we're not going to get into that minutia, but just know that that exists here. And by the way, I am a CPA, I am a CFP, but I'm not a practicing financial advisor. I'm not a practicing tax accountant. I use those credentials mainly in academia. And so make sure to, before you make any life-altering decisions, to talk with someone who knows what they're talking about, your trusted professional. Okay, so income-based repayment plans can be IBRs, income contingent repayment plans, ICRs, and then income sensitive repayment plans. We don't see that last one that often because it's for a specific loan type. So generally speaking, what we see a lot out there are IBR plans and ICR plans. So these, again, you're going to pay a percentage of your discretionary income, around 10 to 12%. IBR and ICR plans are qualifying plans for public service loan forgiveness, but the income sensitive repayment plan is not. So you need to be in IBR or ICR plans to qualify for public service loan forgiveness. And then IBR and ICR plans, again, I told you these come with perks, right? One of the perks is if you're just being crushed by student loan debt and there's no way you're ever going to pay it off. Well, IBR and ICR plans come with loan forgiveness after 20 to 25 years. Now, I know this is not a panacea, okay? This is not great. If you're in that situation, I feel very badly for you. But this is some type of small glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel. That if you're just being crushed, you don't make enough money, you've got 6 figures in debt, there's no way you're ever going to pay it off. You could slot into one of these programs, pay on your debt for 20 to 25 years, and get it forgiven at the end of it. So at least you wouldn't carry this for 50 years, 100 years. You would have some way out for your federal student loans. Okay, so now let's talk loan forgiveness. So we've been talking about public service loan forgiveness. These are for employees that are employed by government and nonprofit organizations. And so this means that the government will forgive the balance on your direct loans after you make 125 qualifying payments, which is important, right? 125 if you divide it, or 120, sorry, I keep saying 25, 120 qualifying payments. If you divide it by 12, what is that? That's 10 years. And so a lot of people talk about public service loan forgiveness being a 10-year program. Well, that's right, but technically it's 125 or 120 qualifying payments. It's not 10 years. You have to be under a qualifying repayment plan, which we've talked about. You have to be working full time, and you have to work for a qualifying employer. And so many people that get rejected by public service loan forgiveness were not hitting all of these categories. And there is a process, by the way, for you to certify that you're doing the right thing when you're a public service loan forgiveness, to give you some peace of mind and to keep in touch with the Department of Education. Oh, excuse me. Department of Education. All right. So you need to be certifying when you're going to a new employer. You need to make sure that they're a qualifying employer. So there's a lot of moving parts here. But again, if you're a lawyer, for instance, and you're working for the government as a lawyer and you have 6 figures in debt, public service loan forgiveness can be an amazing opportunity for you after 10 years to get that debt wiping off your ledger. And so a lot of people look at public service loan forgiveness as an option. Then we have teacher loan forgiveness. This is for teachers who work full-time for 5 years in a low-income elementary school, secondary school, or education service agency. We have borrower's defense, closed school, and false certification. What is this? Well, we saw a lot of for-profit schools out there, especially in the last decade or decade and a half, that went out there and sold their services to kind of unsuspecting consumers that thought they were getting a good deal. And these schools maybe did a number of things. They closed unexpectedly and stranded these students. They made false statements about outcomes, and they made false statements about debt. They falsely certified things. I mean, all sorts of kind of bad stuff happened in these situations. It wasn't only for-profit schools, but you did see a lot of examples of that. And so if you find yourself in that situation where your school just unexpectedly closed and stranded you, you can qualify for debt forgiveness from the government. And actually, not too long ago, many of these applications were just approved, and the government forgave tons of debt because people found themselves in situations that were not entirely their fault. So borrower's defense, closed school, false certification, great programs, especially when people were taken advantage of. Then we have bankruptcy, which is rare, by the way. You should know before you take out student loans that student loans are essentially one of the exceptions in bankruptcy. So unless you just have massive amounts of hardship when it comes to your student loans and repaying that, bankruptcy is not necessarily an easy process to get that done. Then we have death and disability. That of course, if you die or become disabled, there are programs to forgive your debt as well. Then a lot of people don't think of this, but states have loan forgiveness opportunities. And a lot of people overlook this. They don't look at the state level to see what programs they have. This can be a huge error. So for instance, here in Kansas, we want people to move to rural counties and work there. And so we have on the Kansas side, a rural incentive program that if you go and work in a rural area, I believe it's for maybe 3 or 4 years, you can get, I believe, again, I haven't looked at the numbers recently, I think it's 16 or 17,000 forgiven by working in a rural area. So let's say you're a doctor, you go work for a hospital in a rural area, this could be an opportunity for you that to wipe some of that debt off the map. Or a teacher for that instance, going and teaching in a rural school. All right, so, and I'm moving along quickly. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat box. We'll cover them as we get done. Part of the reason why I started doing this presentation recently is because there are some amazing initiatives right now when it comes to COVID-19 and federal student loans. So at least through September 30, if you have federal student loans and you've logged into your account recently, you probably noticed that your payments are suspended. You don't have to make payments, and it's 0% interest right now. This is an incredible opportunity for student loan repay, people who are trying to repay student loans on two different fronts. Okay, on one front, maybe you've been really affected by COVID-19. And so maybe you lost a job, maybe a partner's lost a job, what have you, your situation's changed, you need extra money. If that's been the case, then this means that you can divert that money you would be paying on your federal student loans to more productive causes like feeding and sheltering. So it's really good on that perspective. For those of you that maybe COVID-19 hasn't affected you as much, what does this mean for you? Well, this means that you can take that money, if you want to pay down your federal student loans sooner and earlier, you can go and divert all that money to principal. You're not getting that interest accruing on you. And so it can be a really great opportunity to pay off your loans earlier if that's the best strategy for you. So really great opportunity on both sides of the spectrum. By the way, if you're going for public service loan forgiveness, as long as you're continuing to certify, these suspended payments still count towards public service loan forgiveness. So you're not paying, yet you still have these payments counting towards public service loan forgiveness. And that's incredible. A lot of times we don't see the government kind of double dip on stuff. And so this is a great opportunity to continue on for public service loan forgiveness and save some money because you're not making those payments. Okay, and then suspended payments also count for our income-driven repayment plans as well. Another piece that you may or may not be aware of is for private and federal student loans. If it's forgiven until 2025, it's free loan forgiveness. So one of the things that those of us that do student loan analysis know is a lot of times you might get a loan forgiveness. Now, public service loan forgiveness has always been tax-free, but for many other programs where you get that loan forgiveness, it's actually added to your adjusted gross or your income for that year, and you're taxed on it. And so a lot of people, we call it kind of like the tax bomb in the industry. So a lot of people get this loan forgiveness. They're like, hooray, loan forgiveness. And then they realize they have to pay tax on 60 grand or 100 grand or 150 grand. Well, that's a lot of money. And so you end up being in a really bad situation because a lot of people don't prepare for that. So anyway, tax-free through 2025, that's pretty incredible. So here are two websites. Again, there's another disclaimer here. I'm not a tax provider. I'm not a financial advisor, so I'm not giving that type of advice. But one place you can go and kind of hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, is you can go to studentaid.gov/announcements-events/coronavirus. This will give you lots of information about some of these initiatives. I also, at my own website, gradmetrics.com, blog about these topics on a pretty regular basis. Some of you all maybe come to this presentation wondering, is Biden gonna forgive a bunch of student loan debt? So here's my take on that. Well, first off, Biden had a town hall in February, and he said, I'm not going to do loan forgiveness for 50,000. So that high a number, up to 50,000, I just don't think is going to happen because Biden has told us he's not going to do it. But when it comes to lower amounts, there is increasing pressure for some type of loan forgiveness of some sort. So Senator Elizabeth Warren, for instance, just did a hearing on student loan debt. There was a letter that was sent by 415 organizations to the administration saying you need to do something about student loans. So what do I think is going to happen? I'll tell you my personal experience, by the way. I'm probably going to take out some debt for my doctoral program. I'm not planning to amass 10,000 just to let it sit in the hopes that there will be loan forgiveness. That's my own personal decision. I think if there is loan forgiveness of some persuasion, it will be lower in amount and limited in scope. So let's say maybe $10,000 for those that are in default, active default. I don't know. I don't know what that would be. I don't know if it will even happen at all. But I certainly think it will be limited in scope and lower in amount. Other student loan issues. So one thing that I would put on your radar is because of some changes in law and tax law, more employers are starting to do student loan repayments as a part of a benefits package. And so if you are actively looking for work, or you're looking at other employers, or you might do a job transition soon, you should know that employer repayment assistance is becoming more popular. In fact, I even worked for an employer not too long ago that started up a program. So once you worked there for a couple of years, they would start paying on your student loans. So keep an eye out for this. In a benefits package, it's starting to happen more often. Then if you've come to this presentation with private student loan debt, what can you do? So basically everything I've been talking about is federal student loans because there are lots of perks. We don't have as many perks when it comes to private student loans, but there are some strategies out there. So if you look out there, a lot of these strategies are what you would do for any type of debt, whether it be credit card debt or paying off your car, or paying off your house. So there's two general strategies. The first strategy is what we call the debt snowball. And this is really to build up momentum, okay, to get your spirits up, to really feel like you're making progress. And that would be to pay off your smallest amounts first and then move on to the largest amount. Why? Because again, it's building momentum. You knock off that first student loan, then you're going on to the next one, the next one. It makes you feel jazzed to continue on, right? As much as you can feel jazzed about student loans, right? Then we have the debt avalanche. And so this is the most efficient way to pay off your student loans. This is where you start with the highest interest rate first, and then you move to the lowest interest rate. Well, again, paying off your minimum balances on minimum payments on some of the other areas, but you're focusing on that highest interest rate first. Then there's the opportunity, and I have had conversations with individuals who maybe took out their private student loans 10 years ago, and they got an interest rate of like 10 or 12% or 15%. Well, if that's the case for you, the interest rates are really low right now. And so you can go out if you have good income, good credit now, you have the opportunity to potentially refinance and save a ton of money on interest and take advantage of this low interest rate environment. Okay, one other thing I want to talk about here, and it says consolidation. So what is consolidation? Well, consolidation is for federal student loans, and it's not an interest rate saver, okay? Why? Because consolidation is essentially where the government's going to say, okay, you have 6 loans out there. We're going to take the weighted average of that interest rate, and we are going to tick it up 1/8%. And that's the new interest rate that you get, and they pay off all those old loans and they put it into one loan. So why would we consolidate? Well, there's really a couple reasons. One is if you're consolidating in order to get in a different repayment path. So that's one. The second is to simplify your payments. So if you have 8 different student loans and you only want to have one payment instead of 8 payments, consolidation can help with that as well. And then the final thing is that consolidation can extend your term. Again, we talked about when we extend the term, the payments go down. And so sometimes people like to do that because it's also a saving move in terms of payments, but not necessarily in how much you're going to pay over the life of the loan. So one of the things I want to caution you before you consolidate or before you refinance, make sure you're not going to miss out on a better opportunity through a repayment plan, through loan forgiveness, that you're not going to sacrifice payments, qualifying payments that you've already made towards loan forgiveness. You want to make sure, because once you consolidate or once you refinance, sometimes you lose some of these perks. And definitely when you refinance, if you take federal student loans, you refinance them into private student loans, it's gone. Like your federal perks that we just talked about, they're gone. You now have a private student loan. It's no longer a government loan. You're not going to have some of the things that we talked about in this presentation. Okay, additional resources. So now where can you go for additional help? One is a loan servicer. So your federal loans are serviced by a loan servicer. Here are their phone numbers. Sometimes they're helpful, sometimes they're not. So that's the way it is, but you can always reach out to your loan servicer. Another way you can get help is by studentaid.gov. This is the best website for anything loans, federal student loans, and anything financial aid. It's a great opportunity for you. And it's an amazing resource. So check out this website, published by the government, not a sales pitch here, just a government giving you the information. Then there's also a hotline. So I do step-by-step workshops on the FAFSA. There's a hotline you can call when you're filling out the FAFSA. Well, there's also a hotline you can call when there's student loans. You might imagine there'd be a hotline out there when there's 1.67 trillion in student loan debt, and there is. The 1-800-4-FED-AIDS. So you can always call them and ask questions directly to the government as well. You can visit my website, so gradmetrics.com. I blog on these topics and more. And I also have a podcast. So it's called GradCentric. You can get it on any of these websites, Apple, Google, Spotify, whatever you listen to, I'm probably on the platform, GradCentric podcast. And then finally, here's my contact information. So you can email me, you can call me. This number that's listed here, you can also text me at that number. So I'm always here to give you some help in that category. And then if you want the slides to this presentation, I've posted them at gradmetrics.com/workshops. So you can have this information that will give you the links and all the resources. So check that out. I've already posted it there. It's there for you. I've also posted PDFs of other workshops I've done if you're interested in that. And then one final thing I would say, let me get a drink because I know I'm going to take questions here, is if this content has really resonated with you, and maybe it's even left you with more questions and answers, please reach out to me. And because one of the things that I'm doing is I'm actually building a student loan course. And so this will be, so many student loan folks out there are charging people to do a student loan analysis. And I do that too. I do student loan analysis out there in the industry. But one of the things that I've wanted to do is to build a course where people can go through it, and it will give them all the information they need to make a good decision about their loans. Where can I go and get a student loan analysis and do it myself? Where can I go and figure out about repayment plans and which one's right for me? So I'm building that out as we speak. And I am looking for individuals who want to pilot that for a significant discount or even for free. I'm not sure. But if you're interested in that and you'd like to be part of the pilot group for that student loan course, please email me, jason@gradmetrics.com. I'd be more than happy to plug you into that once it's built out and notify you once it's available. Okay, so that's the last thing, Jason@gradmetrics. Please email me if that's of interest to you. And with that, I will leave it be, and we'll answer some questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all of that, Jason. Everybody in attendance here, I know there's a whole lot of content, and just kudos to you for smashing that all down into approximately 43 minutes, I'll say. I know everybody has their own unique situations, and because of that, we'll go ahead and take a Q&A for anybody who has questions. We'll take that off air, so to speak. So we'll go ahead and pause this recording in just a moment. Everybody who has questions after all of Jason's excellent content, feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat. If it's too much to put in the chat, we'll go ahead and, we can have some cameras and microphones turned back on following the recorded portion of this presentation. But again, Jason, thank you so much for all of this info. Everybody be sure to drop a thank you in the chat, thanking Jason to, not only taking time, but taking time out of his vacation to share all this outstanding financial aid info. By the way, everyone, if you're interested in viewing more programs related to career and finance, we have recordings available in several locations, youtube.com/Joco Library, as well as the Library On Demand Hub, which can be found via the events page at jocolibrary.org. While you're on the site, feel free to also check out the research menu to find additional career and finance related resources. For those of you who have questions, stick around for our Q&A session with Jason, which we will start here in just a moment.